Tonight, government backs down on stance against broader consultation on controversial Ejapa deal. Joy News is learning that the finance minister, in a marathon meeting which is still underway with more than 20 civil society groups, has just agreed to consult widely, including engaging the TUC and chiefs on the deal. The CSOs, meanwhile, say they still want government to put a pause on the Ejapa deal.
So we expect that, yes, the ministry will be willing to slow down the process a bit for much wider consultation. We're hoping that the finance ministry will not take an entrenched position. If they do, then of course there's no need really calling for this engagement.
We have the very latest for you from this meeting today, with the government officials on one side and CSOs on the other.
This is Top Story with Evans Mensah.
And Top Story is always brought to you by Gassim Cement, the nation builder, and Vodafone. The future is exciting ready. It has been a marathon meeting between 21 civil society organizations, representative, of course, of these organizations, and top government executives, including the finance minister himself and his deputy, and a host of other officials who have been engaging the civil society groups on the controversial Ejapa deal. This follows weeks of heated debate and controversy, some name calling as well. The civil society guys had demanded broader consultations and asked the government to put the deal on hold. Well, the government had initially held several press conferences and made the point that the deal was clean and that consultations with the civil society groups prior to executing the entire contract as at this point wasn't necessary. But they reached a middle point and the meeting was called today. They've been in that meeting since, in the last few hours. We are now getting the latest from this particular meeting that we understand is still underway at the finance ministry, including a concession now by the finance minister to now engage more broadly on the issue of the controversial Ejapa deal, which will mortgage our mineral resources for an upfront amount of some $500 million initially. The entire deal is valued as $1 billion, which in itself has been questioned. The finance minister, we understand in this meeting, has agreed, has backed down from that earlier stance against broader consultations, and has agreed to consult a bit more, including consulting the Trade Union Congress, the National House of Chiefs as well. We also understand that the finance minister has been making a detailed presentation of the government position to the civil society organizations. We have more on this coming up here on Top Story, but just before the meeting began, we spoke to one of the leaders of the CSOs, Dr. Steve Mateo, and this were his expectations, with a warning to the finance minister and the government team to be open-minded as well to the CSOs' concerns and not take an entrenched position as the discussions were about to begin.
A group of CSOs, we know more 15, we are about 21 now. We actually had scheduled a press conference today, but last night we had information from the finance ministry that the minister would want to engage, and so we actually in the process of getting ourselves ready for this afternoon's meeting.
Well, this particular deal, the 15 CSOs, now 21, had described it as an elite capture and asked for its immediate suspension. Going into this meeting today, are you hopeful that that will happen?
Well, I must say it's good to engage, and in fact, better to engage in good faith. So we go into this meeting with a very open mind. We seek nothing short of safeguarding the national interest of the transaction. We're not really dead against what government is trying to do. There's nothing wrong with seeking to optimize your returns from your natural resources. But I think our major concern has to do with the level of transparency, the lack of accountability provisions in the very law that set up the stage for the EJAPA transaction and all that. So what we're seeking to do really is to provide further safeguards of the national interest, so that at least we know as citizens and as stakeholders that at least we are covered in the transaction.
So what is the expected posturing are you expecting from the finance minister and government for that matter on this particular issue as you go into that meeting?
We're hoping that the finance ministry will not take an entrenched position coming into this meeting. If they do, then of course there'll be no need really calling for this engagement. You call for engagement when you are willing to listen and to accommodate concerns of those who are worried about the way you are proceeding. So if you come into this meeting and for you it's a foregone conclusion, then of course you must as well not engage.
So you're going into this meeting hopeful that the concerns that you had raised will be taken into account, or you're expecting a suspension outright?
First and foremost, like I said, there are serious weaknesses in the Mineral Income Investment Fund Act. These weaknesses we want addressed. To do so, you cannot proceed regardless. You will need to put a hold on your roadmap or your steps you are taking to implement the law. And so we expect that, yes, the ministry will be willing to slow down the process a bit, first and foremost, for much wider consultation, and then again, for putting in the safeguards that will safeguard the national interest.
So you had that. The major demand from the civil society groups, 21 of them, Dr. Steve Mattel tells us, going into this meeting was that they wanted government to put a pause on the EJAPA deal and consult broadly. It appears from what we are learning from this meeting, which, by the way, is still underway from what we understand with the finance minister himself and other government officials, that the government is now ready to soften its stance and concede to that demand and consult a bit more broadly. From what we understand, the finance minister has been making a strict presentation about the financial benefits of this deal to the country and defending what government had already done, as in the amendment to the Mineral Income Investment Fund, the deal before Parliament, which was approved, giving birth to a EJAPA royalties company, which of course was set up in a tax haven, which has generated a lot of controversy so far. But if you're just joining us, that is the latest on this EJAPA deal from this meeting with the civil society groups, which is still underway. Government ready to consult now. I want to bring in energy expert Mr. Kojopoku, who joins us on the telephone line right now. He's one of those who, ahead of all this, had raised questions about the deal and had categorically stated here on Joy News that he doesn't believe that the deal will be beneficial in the long run. Mr. Kojopoku, thank you for your time here on Top Story. Tell me, what do you make of the latest development you're hearing from this meeting with the 21 CSOs, the finance minister and government now ready to consult?
Well, it's good for democracy and it's good for Ghana. When you are doing something and people say that stop and listen, consult, broader consultation would only bring benefits to Ghanaians. Nobody is saying that don't do what you want to do if you think the benefit will be at a better if the consultation is done. So it's good news that at least Ghanaians will wake up tomorrow and get the news that, or Ghanaians this evening will get the news that the government that they have would listen when CSOs now come up. Some of us were very uncomfortable the way certain politicians and government officials were calling CSOs names, saying that some CSOs have ulterior motives. I don't think that's the case. Now that we are hearing of better consultation, at the end of the day, Ghana will be the winner.
So, but it begs the question, right? If the government now says they're ready to engage, isn't this fait accompli? before they engage. I mean, what are they going to engage on? I mean, the process is done, sealed, dusted, everything. Parliament has approved it. They are putting together the board of Ejapa. Will the consultations now at this stage mean anything, change anything?
Oh, yes. We can always make amendments to Parliament. We can always change amendments to the structure. If we think the financial structure is not beneficial to Ghanaians, we can change it. I mean, the government took the law to Parliament, and I'm sure the politicians will even appreciate it better. Parliamentarians, which is the NDC, were also up in arms. So if a better amendment goes to make it a much structured financing structure, I don't see why anybody would be in a hurry to say, oh, it's already been passed, don't bring it back. You can appreciate what Franklin Kujo, Dr. Manteya have all been putting together with the valuation, with what the composition of the shareholders are. If all these are explained well and everybody has the buy-in, it's a win-win for Ghana. So I don't think it's too late. It's just better too late than never.
I'm not sure if possibly semantics is coming in here, because I'm saying that because if it's a consultation, then of course you are open to change your mind. But if it's a case of we've taken the decision, we want to go out there now and explain our position, then that possibly be different. I mean, I guess the question I'm asking is, which approach would you recommend government takes? Is it the one about going around and consulting TUC, the chiefs, to get them to appreciate why we are doing this, because that wasn't done before, or they should go in there and listen, take feedback, and use that to amend the process so far?
The latter. It would be very foolish on anybody's part to say that you are going to do consultation. There's a difference between education and consultation. If you are going to educate on what you are trying to do, then that is really an event in futility. There's no point. But if you want to consult, it means that you have the position, you listen to our position, and at the end of the day, we'll come to a much better position that will help Ghana. But if the approach will be to educate us what you want to do, then I don't think much will be achieved from that. But honestly, from what I'm getting from the report coming out and from what you are saying, if the word consultation is being used, I don't think it is to now come in and tell us what they want to do, just to basically achieve that thing of, oh, yeah, I consulted them and so this is what I'm going to do. I don't think that will benefit anybody.
Very finally, I mean, if you look at what we've heard so far from government, I mean, the finance minister not too long ago did a press conference. In fact, they give timelines to what they want to do, including they want to, get Ejapa to list on the stock exchange in London before the end of the year. They've already put in place a mechanism. I mean, as late as last night on PM Express, the board chairman of the Mineral Income Investment Fund was vigorous about government going ahead with this plan, even in the face of the minority saying to them that they're going to notify the London Stock Exchange and the Financial Services Authority in the UK. So I guess the point is about, with all the government had done so far, to begin the process afresh, go back to Parliament. Remember that Parliament itself has a very short window before the elections to rise and go ahead. You are honestly confident and believe and trust that this process will be amended before Parliament finally comes in and rises. Very short period, really, before the election.
We don't always think that there must be an amendment. Maybe the law has been passed, maybe needs to be looked at again. Look, everybody understands the expedience with which government wants to do this. So if civil society wants to make an input, we should also basically buckle up and do it with a bit of haste, because there's already a timeline. What we should appreciate, you could appreciate, I understand that last week your good friend Kojo Ponkroma said that, look, a government doesn't need to consult civil society because it's already gone to Parliament. This same government has now engaged civil society in a meeting today and have agreed to do broader consultation. It's a step from what we were last week. So you never know. The minute they've agreed to do the consultation, let's give them the benefit of the doubt so that we can all appreciate and make our input. But yes, if there are timelines, everybody would be prepared to work day and night to make sure the inputs are made quickly.
Mr. Kudopoku, I'm grateful that you joined us. He is an energy expert, obviously, and has been, of course, very keenly following what has been happening as we speak. That meeting with the civil society organizations, 21 of them, they were initially 16 since the last press conference, and government's own reactions to it. They've boasted their ranks, and they're now 21. They are still in that meeting with the finance minister and his team, and we're still getting some additional information from that I will share with you shortly. But I'm pretty sure you've heard Mr. Kudopoku mention the law itself, because all that government has been doing with this Japa deal was part of the Mineral Income Investment Fund Act that was passed in 2018, and an amendment done recently. If you read that original act, it gives details about what the fund is allowed to do, including, I want to quote here, including, if you look at the powers of the fund may create and hold equity interest in a special purpose vehicle. As we've seen it, its manifestation is in what we've seen in the Japa. So the fund can create and hold equity interest in a special purpose vehicle in any jurisdiction. Note that. In any jurisdiction in furtherance of its objects, and the special purpose vehicle shall be free to operate as a regular commercial company. This was passed in my colleague Joseph Boku-Gakpo, who is a parliamentary correspondent in the studio. This was passed in what, September 2018? 2018.
On 28th September 2018. That's the day on which it was.
So note the clauses. This was passed 2 years ago with this clause that says that the special purpose vehicle, which we now see in a Japa, can be created in any jurisdiction, including a tax haven. And we've seen that it's being established in a tax haven. The law gives it the power, the fund the power to do exactly what has happened in front of the objectives. And the vehicle shall be free to open as a regular commercial. Let me read on. It says, procure the listing of the special purpose vehicle on any reputable stock exchange that it considers appropriate. Now we know they are going to list it where? On the London Stock Exchange. Again, in 2018, it was in the law. C, assign or transfer all or any of his rights to minerals income, all or any of his rights to minerals income to a special purpose vehicle. Again, remember a Japa. Anytime you hear that, this was 2018, remember a Japa. In furtherance of the objects of the fund, including through allocation agreements and stability agreements. I've heard a complaint that this contract that was approved by Parliament, in effect, is a stability agreement. Well, as you just heard in that law passed in 2018, the provision was made for it in law for that to happen. D, assign or transfer all or any of the minerals equity interest. All or any of the mineral equity interest held on behalf of the Republic to a special purpose vehicle in furtherance of the objects of the funding. So the fund can give everything they own on our behalf to the special purpose vehicle. Everything. 100%. I mean, as we've heard, Joseph, how much are they ceding? How much are they giving to Japa?
75.6%.
So if you look at the law, it seems like they've even been kind to us because the law allows them to give everything to the special purpose vehicle. I mean, the central question to ask then is, where were the members of parliament who are now opposing this when this law was being considered back in September 2018? And what stance did they take? As the hands that will have it, we'll get into that shortly. But on PM Express yesterday, I put that question to the ranking member of the Finance Committee, is a minority spokesperson on finance, Casey Latofosin, who, by the way, his committee did a lot of work on this particular law at the committee level before the committee recommended its approval. So what did he do about this when this first emerged in 2018? This was his answer.
We fought against it. Come on. Where's the evidence? Go to the Hansard. I wish you go to the Hansard. Do you have any? I don't have a Hansard here. Thank you. But I know. The very case, the very amendment. We are now moderating well. The very amendment. But now you are being straight. The NDC members of Parliament, led by the Honourable Muntaka, opposed this proposed amendment. And then obviously they are more exactly this particular call. This very particular amendment. I have two numbers. Go back to the Hansard. Yes. In fact, I was even reading the Hansard before I forgot to bring it. But let me take him serious. I'm sure nobody walked out. Yes. So what you work out on the act. It means you agreed to. You were there. I saw you in Parliament. You are a liar. You are a big liar. I was not even in the house. That was when we were doing registration. I wasn't there. Honourable Muntaka was there. He raised the issues. I've read it in the Hansard. No, you said you saw me. You are a big liar. No. And Evans, I'm putting my credibility on the line. You proposed an amendment to this clause. This very clause. And it was defeated. But this was on the floor. This was on the floor. I mean, at the committee level. What did the committee recommend? Because government. Was it a majority? This is 2018. Was it a majority report that came? This is not the 2018 one. This is the amendment you are talking about. Yeah, amendment. Yes. But it still would have gone to the committee level. But the 2018 one did not have this one. Yes. Before it comes to the plenary, the committee would have done work. Of course. What was the committee's report? What was the minority? You were on the committee. Yeah, I'm on the committee. You're the ranking. I'm the ranking. At the committee, what report did you recommend? Did you recommend approval? The committee, what we do when the bills like this appear before us, we go to the committee. We discuss the broad policy, and then we'll go to the consideration of the cross-by-cross item. When you go to cross-by-cross item, and they put it, and you have amendment, and then you want to push the amendment, it will be put subject to vote, and in the end, if majority carries the day, then it carries, and you take it to the plenary, and the plenary will discuss it. You don't vote on it unless you disagree with the entire. But some policy have a majority report. Yes, a majority report on the entire policy. Yes, entire policy, not cross by cross. No, but in this case, it was a collective recommendation for approval. On this particular one. But yes, including this particular one. But this particular one amendment we are talking about, we the members of minority said that we disagree. At the floor, come to the floor. And then when we come to the floor, it is when we came to the floor that we elected our leadership, that we feel that this particular one must be expunged. But you pen your signature to the report that approved. I did not pen my signature to the report. But you are the ranking. No, I'm the ranking. But you see, I'm one person, and the minority members are 10 out of 25. They are 50. But so certainly they are more than you. Certainly they are more than you. Yeah. So the Parliament will work with a number of people. We subject things to vote. The majority carry the way, carry the day, and that's why we say the minority will have their voice. The majority will have their say. In the end, when they approve it, they say Parliament has approved it. Okay? But that doesn't mean that there were not dissenting views.
Okay. So that is Case Olatofo Singh, and he was absolutely categorical that the minority will still fight this, and this, whatever happened in 2018 should not bar them from raising objections today. Now, he raised the point that when I read the Act 2018 version to him, that I was quoting from the amendment which was done recently. I was not. I was quoting actually from the 2018 version, which had all the provisions I shared with you earlier that allowed the fund and government to do exactly what they're doing with Ajapa. I want to bring in Joseph again. Joseph, so we now know what the 2018 original act said. What did the amendment say? What changed in the recent one?
So mainly, government was seeking to ensure a situation where, when it comes to Ajapa, formerly Asase, two specific regulations don't apply to it: the Public Financial Management Act 2016, as well as the Public the 2016, as well as all the other amendments that have been done to it subsequently, and then a second act, the State Interest and Governance Authority Act 2019. These are two specific legislation that are supposed to govern various institutions that actually have some form of government control or are owned by government. So, for example, the Public Financial Management Act and the regulations are specific that when it comes to state-owned enterprises or enterprises which are wholly or partially controlled by the government of Ghana, we should see a situation where every year there should be the submission to the Minister of Finance, the annual financial statement of the previous year. A budget needs to be submitted from that organization. Once it's either government owned or partially owned by government to the finance minister, there should be the submission of financial projections for up to 3 years to the finance minister. There should be the submission of what they call the annual borrowing and recovery plan by that organization to the finance minister. There should also be the situation where as long as that entity is operating not later than 20 business days, there should be a record of outstanding debts and new borrowings submitted to the finance minister.
So there's a tall list of reporting obligations.
Under the Public Financial Management Act, which actually applies to entities that are both government-owned and partially government-owned. So this amendment that was subsequently brought to Parliament about 2 months ago was seeking to make sure that EJAPA does not necessarily follow some of these specific regulations as captured. And these regulations as captured in the Public Financial Management Act actually come with sanctions that if you don't do them, you could be fined anywhere in between 1,800 cedis and 3,000 cedis and or go to prison for between 6 months and 2 years. So that's the first effort that government made with the amendment that came. And then there is the SIGA Act, the State Interest and Governance Act, which
headed by Asamoah Boateng.
Yes, so the authority that's looking at that is headed by Stephen Asamoah Boateng.
So the fund would have come under SIGA.
The fund would have come under SIGA.
But then the amendment took them out away from SIGA.
Exactly, and the law governing SIGA makes the point that it applies to entities that government has a joint interest in terms of joint government companies that actually has government investment in, and also state-owned enterprises. So if originally that amendment had not come, EJAPA would have been required to pay a monitoring fee to SIGA. EJAPA would have been required to comply with any request that SIGA would want to make for information as far as its operations are concerned. It would have been required to actually comply with any directives that will be coming from the minister responsible for SIGA. And again, that comes with some penalties. And so that is what government sought to correct,
with the amendment.
EJAPA would have the kind of freedom that is non-existent even with other.
And you use the word freedom, but in the original act of 2018, the word used there was that the special purpose vehicle shall be free to operate as a regular commercial company. So what the amendment was seeking to do was, in furtherance of this original provision in there, allow them to be free, take them away from SIGA's control, and then also give them take them away from all these reporting obligations. Now let's talk about another thing that Case Atto-Forson touched on, which is that when this original law came to Parliament in September of 2018,
just to make the point, the bill that came to Parliament, that's the Minerals Income Investment Fund Bill 2018 that came to Parliament, actually was laid on the floor on the sometime in early 2018.
Okay.
And then on the 25th of July, there was what is called the second reading of it, and it was eventually then approved when Parliament was recalled for an emergency sitting between the 24th and 28th of September. So over a space of like a week, Parliament then went through the Act. The report of the Finance Committee on this, which had actually recommended about 62 different amendments to the Act, were actually debated over long duration, sometimes going late into the 9th. And within the space of about 4 to 5 days, between the 24th and the 28th of September, Parliament eventually got that particular legislation approved.
Okay, so that is the context within which the law was approved. But when Case Atto-Forson says that when the law came up, and they were looking at it, and he was a ranking on the Finance Committee, he says that, and when it came to the plenary for debate, the minority side raised an objection to one particular clause, and I want to read it again. The clause that gave powers to the fund to create and hold equity interest in a special purpose vehicle in any jurisdiction. And that is important because one of the minority members' key concern is the fact that it's in Jersey, a jurisdiction which is, it's a tax haven. This particular clause in furtherance of its objects, and the special purpose group shall be free to operate a regular commercial company. He says when the thing came to the floor, they objected to this. He said Muntaka Mubarak, who is a minority chief whip, raised an objection, and the minority had their say, but the majority had their way. Is that accurate from the Hansard record of that particular day?
So first of all, this is actually something that had the Finance Committee's report recommending approval with the support of both those on the majority and the minority side.
Now let's take that slowly. So what you're saying is, at the committee level, when they recommended that the bill should be approved by the General House and become law if assented to by the President, both NDC and MPP members at the committee level recommended its approval.
That's correct. So just to quote the Finance Committee's report that came to the floor for debate, it makes the point that the committee has thoroughly examined the bill and finds that its passage would help maximize the value of the nation's mineral wealth to enhance the lives of the people of Ghana. Then the Finance Committee went on to say that the committee therefore recommends to the House to adopt this report and pass the Mineral Income Investment Fund Bill 2018 into law, subject to the proposed amendment in accordance with Article 106 of the 1992 Constitution, and also the standing orders of the House.
Just some clarity. And I asked that question of Case After Forcing. Was this a majority only? Because it happens where the majority only can write this, and the minority side will definitely raise an objection.
And in that case, then it's stated when the report is actually brought to the House, it's stated in the report that the decision was taken as a majority decision and not exactly by. But then in this case, then the indication is clear that it was the General Committee's recommendation that the House approved this because they were convinced that it will maximize the nation's value as far as the mineral wealth of the country.
Okay, so now it came to the floor. Is it true that the minority at that level objected to the clause I read earlier?
There were a number of suggested amendments standing in the name of a number of folks, including Alhaji Inusa A.B.A. Husseini. There were suggested amendments to the bill itself from Evans Mensah to the majority leader and a number of others. We've checked, and in terms of any suggested amendments coming from Muntaka Mubarak, that hasn't been spotted in the Hansard per the details on the deliberations on it between the 24th and 28th when the House did the consideration of this particular. Okay, so we didn't find Muntaka's objection as Case After Forcing had talked about. But do we find anything from other minority members who had objected to some of the clauses? A number of them. And so, for example, there were concerns that were being raised that in terms of whether a JAPA should be an authority or the Mineral Income Investment Fund should actually be an authority or it should remain as a fund. There were proposals from some MPs that there should be the change of name, which will actually shut down. There were proposals that there should be an accurate definition. I mean, I'm looking for those from the minority side. I mean, and whether if you have any specifics like that, but we didn't find Muntaka. Minority side members? From the minority side members, well, Alhaji A.B.A. Husseini proposed a number of amendments to it. There were arguments by Mahama Shaibu, for example, who was arguing that they should look at the whole issue of having a representative from the ministry serving on some of these particular boards. So recommending that there should be a clear definition of that. Roxy Nafiamekwa, another minority MP, also made some suggestions on the changes that should be made. But in all, there were 62 suggested amendments that the House had to go through and eventually get approved. Okay, I mean, but the substantive controversial point in the clause, as in where a JAPA could operate, the special purpose vehicle, as in the freedom that it will have, as in the listing on the stock exchange, the how much of the mineral royalties they can control. We still haven't found anything yet, and of course this is still something that we're still checking that shows that these concerns were raised on the floor during the debate. Correct. Okay. I mean, and this is something that we're still checking. It's a pretty voluminous document, and if there are additional details as this unfolds, we'll bring that to you. But as we speak, that meeting with the civil society organizations still underway with the finance minister. But as you may have heard on Top Story, the decision, the word we're getting from that meeting that the finance minister is now ready to consult broadly, including TUC and the chiefs across the country. Still ahead here
on Newsnight.
Bureau of Public Safety calls for immediate scrapping of mandatory $150 testing of travelers into Ghana, citing